Hello, you're watching TVP World Talks. I'm Jonasz Rewiński. Ukraine's Donbas region is in the spotlight as peace talks gather momentum, but the emerging ideas for ending the war remain vague and sometimes controversial. Latest reports indicate a possible hybrid status for the war-torn region, referred to as a free economic zone. Yet, as President Zelenskyy said, in the end it will be up to the Ukrainian people to decide whether to accept any such deal. As many other crucial issues, such as security guarantees for Ukraine, are still being discussed, what kind of peace deal can we expect to emerge in the end? Joining us now is Ruslan Stefanov, Program Director at the Center for the Study of Democracy. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Hello, thanks for having me.
So first of all, let's remind our viewers, why does the Donbas region matter so much? Because it's not just a point on the map. It is, in fact, so much more, right?
Well, yes. I mean, it was where the Russian incursion first happened in 2014, and it is also a key strategic kind of goal of Russia's invasion. So holding off to that area and not allowing Russia to capture the whole region is, of course, an issue of contention. I would also note that this is kind of shows whether the strategic goals of Russia are achieved and whether Ukraine has managed to hold off at least partially the Russian advance.
So there is also the question of the fortress belt, right? Because Russia wants to have pieces of the Donbas region which it still does not control. Ukraine controls them. Russia insists, okay, if you want a peace deal, hand it over to us. Now, Ukraine doesn't want that, clearly. What would that mean for Ukraine if it was forced somehow to let go of those parts of the region?
Well, I think this has been in the pipeline quite a lot recently. Well, at least since already since the September negotiations in Alaska, and even before that, clearly President Trump has pushed the Europeans and Ukraine to accept that there will have to be some swap of land. The critical thing is that I don't think anyone in Europe or Ukraine believes that Russia is really serious about stopping there. In what we have been analyzing this war since its very beginning, since 2014, and for what we could say is that Russia is actually intended not just to take over the whole of Donbas, but also has wanted a land bridge to Transnistria, which is a breakaway region in Moldova, and where there are already Russian troops. So I think I would say it's very difficult to expect that there will be an agreement on the part of Ukraine, because this is a critical issue, not just the region itself, but that it allows Russia to achieve its strategic goals, at least in the near term, which means I don't see them. Why wouldn't they try to do more when there are clearly no good security guarantees, as President Zelenskyy mentioned, as the European partners mentioned, for Ukraine, no guarantees that there will be European or other independent troops in Ukraine, and knowing that Putin was very much intent on taking the Odessa region and having essentially blocking Ukraine's access to the Black Sea. So I don't think this would be a surprise to anyone that Russia views this as a success. They will announce it as a success, and in case they see that as a success, I don't think that in like 5-10 years time anything would stop them to actually continue.
So what kind of security guarantees would actually prevent Russia from acting in that way? Because we still don't know any specifics, right? We've had reports that these might be NATO Article 5 style security guarantees, but who would be providing them? When would they be triggered? Essentially, how to prevent that from becoming a Budapest Memorandum 2.0 kind of situation?
Well, the thing is, the only country that could actually provide a Article 5 type guarantee is the US. The EU currently doesn't have the capacity to deliver the same amount of deterrence as the US is. The other country that could do that, of course, is China. But definitely, we haven't seen China engage in any reasonable way in Ukraine, and it has quite the opposite, announced the unlimited partnership with Russia. So, in that respect, I can see why President Zelenskyy and everybody else is very skeptical on actually allowing Russia to capture that part of the Donbas, that remaining piece of the Donbas. Because Russia has been so aggressive in its posture, in its language, and that's not just recently. It is ever since 2019, 2021, 22. I mean, it has been very aggressive towards the whole European project. It has announced that it actually strategically wants to return to the NATO borders of 96, 97, which means whole Central and Eastern Europe losing its Article 5 status. So in that respect, I think trusting Russia would be A, very difficult, if not impossible, and B, it will be at Europe's own peril. I do not think that Russia is serious about peace. They have perpetrated so many war crimes, so many heinous crimes, starting from the MH17 downing of the Zeri plane, killings in Bucha and where not. Every day that continues. It's just piling up, and in a way, it just doesn't seem feasible that if we give them more, they will actually want to stop. This is exactly what Europe has done in the past. This is exactly what we did in 2014. So Europe said, okay, Crimea is Russian, Eastern Donbas is ethnically Russian. Why don't we appease you? Continue our trade relations, continue import of gas. This didn't work. Russia still plowed on, and I think this is exactly why President Zelenskyy will want to have a referendum on surrendering any territory, because there's been so much suffering. I don't think there is any family in Ukraine that currently wants to give up even an inch of territory, even though, because the suffering is so deep that they're already, beyond the point where they would be willing to trust Russia in any way whatsoever, unless they are stopped at the front line. And to do this, you already require these types of guarantees, which are essentially the U.S. can deliver currently. Europe could also do it if they agree to put troops. That would, of course, be under direct threat of future Russian attack. So these are very, very complex, difficult discussions, and as we've seen so far, Russia has been the one that has only talked. So we haven't seen any reasonable practical move where Russia would actually agree to a peace deal. Quite the opposite. Putin keeps saying, we will plow on no matter what. So we will retake this territory. And I don't see, if we agree to that, I don't see how this will stop him from continuing and doing more.
Now, speaking of which, do you think that President Zelenskyy actually scored a tactical victory by saying, okay, if the US wants elections in Ukraine, we could hold them? Because Russia actually said, no, we're not going to organize any sort of ceasefire for the duration of the vote, which would be a logical demand. People voting when missiles are flying by, just zipping by, wouldn't just make sense. So do you think that this might expose the fact that, as you've mentioned, Russia doesn't really have any intentions for lasting peace, and perhaps shift the narrative once again in Ukraine's favor, allowing Trump to see, okay, the only person that's stopping this peace from happening is Putin and not Zelenskyy?
Well, yes, I think President Zelenskyy has been very reasonable and smart in this way, and I have to say, this is a truly a difficult decision, and I think he's just putting also the this vote, and it will be a vote essentially of a referendum on the peace agreement, because I think President Zelenskyy knows pretty well that Ukrainians don't want to peace at any cost, because they have suffered so much. There has been so many, all families have been afflicted so much pain. So I think President Zelenskyy in this case is pretty honest, and I don't think that it's a really serious argument to discuss that there is some sort of legitimacy issues in who signs that peace accord. But I think it is a reasonable way forward. Of course, it opens another Pandora box, which is why wouldn't people in Donbas, for example, Ukrainians who want to vote, wouldn't be allowed to vote? And of course, Russia meddling would be very much on the map. And of course, a nation at war. We haven't seen that. We've forgotten what it is. But typically, it is it is very normal that the nation wants to rally behind the person who actually helped it defend itself, and it is really, I would say, strategically a problem for Ukraine to be pressured to hold elections when I think it's pretty clear by all independent views that President Zelensky's stance on the peace agreement, President Zelensky's leadership is not questioned by the Ukrainian population. So it will be I would say probably pretty much a not very useful formal referendum on the peace talks, and this will of course weaken the resolve of the country, because President Zelenskyy and all the other candidates will have to focus on defending what peace agreement they will be offering. I think it will be a referendum on any potential peace agreement, and again, the key problem here is Russia. It's not Ukraine, and this has been it's been shown many times. I mean, President Trump offered Putin a very good deal back in Alaska. I mean, it was an open door with many different options, and I don't think that the U.S. truly believes Russia is serious about it. I can see that the sanctions and OFAC sanctions on Russian oil and gas companies continue, because I think the U.S. also knows that Russia is not serious about peace.
Ruslan Stefanov was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your insight. And I'm Jonasz Rewiński. You're watching TVP World. Please do stay with us.